thanks everyone for joining. If you have any questions, you can continue to type them on the bottom left corner there, or you can save them to the end. We'll have plenty of time to get to your questions afterwards. I actually don't have anything scheduled after this, so if you want to hang out and ask additional questions, I will be available. Today we're going to talk about some advanced Lawson data retrieval. So it isn't just SQL that we're going to focus on. In fact, when I first started putting this presentation together, I thought I had a lot of really cool SQL statements that I could share with you guys. But the more I looked at them, what occurred to me is that a lot of them would not appeal to any of you guys necessarily, but the way I went about writing them might. So what I thought I would focus a lot of this webinar on is how do I find the data that I'm looking for in Lawson in such an efficient way now, whereas it could be a challenge to those of you who are not really used to seeing that. So we'll spend some of our time on that. Then we'll look at some SQL that I can share with you that can help you kind of do certain things around your Lawson database. So let's do a quick poll. I just want to see what flavor of database you guys are on. So let's see, start. Go ahead and select your flavor of your database that you are currently on so that we kind of get an idea. Looks like a lot of Oracle, not very many. Here we go. Okay. Lots of Microsoft users, good. And quite a few Oracle as well. Well, that's kind of what I suspected. We'll stop this vote now. And so that looks like about 50% of you are Microsoft, and the other is mostly Oracle and some DB2. Nobody's still on something like Informix or anything like that. One thing I just want to kind of clear up before we start is if you're an iSeries client, if I don't get to it for whatever reason, hit me up at the very end with your question about how you translate between the tables within iSeries and how everybody else is used to looking at tables. So there's a neat little document that I will share with you at the end. So this should apply to all Lawson installations. So if you're an Oracle shop, an IBM shop, or Microsoft SQL Server shop, either way, this should be a good session for you. And regardless of what platform or what operating system you're on, even iSeries folks should be able to take away the same things from this. My presentation, the parts that I will be doing live will be on a Windows server, but like I said, it shouldn't make much of a difference. Now, this session is for those of you who have worked with SQL to some extent, or at least you were in the previous session that we did this morning on getting introductions to SQL Server. And if you are on that session, or if you're just generally been using SQL, you know that for the most part, what's challenging is finding the data that you need. Now, Lawson has a lot of databases. You may not think of all of them when you first think of a Lawson database. You're probably just thinking about your production application database, but there's actually quite a few. So there is that production application database. Typically, we call that prod or app or live or whatever it is that you guys call it. And that's where all of your, well, most of your business data is stored. Okay, so that is just about all your, if you're an HR customer or you're a finance customer, all that information about your HR, finance, or procurement is stored within that prod database. Then you have Logan, which houses a lot of kind of metadata for running your application, and that's kind of changing, going to version 10 and whatnot. There's Gen that really is a very systems type of product line, and I use the word product line and database kind of interchangeably in this context. So Gen will have information about your user, about your reports, about your print files, and things that really kind of help you run the application. Then there is all of the LBI databases. There's 4 of those that you may be familiar with. You might have mobile supply chain management. You might have tax factory. If you have payroll, you might actually have Vertex. If you have if you got sales tax and things like that you're calculating. You might have some cubes that you've created to look at your data, and you may have the data warehouse product from Lawson. So a typical client probably has anywhere between 5 to 15 databases that are related to Lawson. And really having SQL access to all of those, I think, is a great way to debug problems, do some quick reporting, do some ad hoc reports that can return some useful information to you. You can even use that same SQL within a process flow to pull data in and out of Lawson. Or you could use it to correct some bad data within a Lawson table, which I don't really recommend, but in certain circumstances, it may be okay. So like I said, so the problem is really Lawson has all these different databases, and each one of those databases has several hundred, sometimes thousands of tables, and the table names don't necessarily make sense. The field names don't necessarily make sense. And then the other problem is, and again, depending on what version of Lawson and what version of the database and whatnot, the relationships and the indices, which is what we call constraints, they're not actually on the database itself, okay? So if they were, you would be able to model the database using a lot of different tools that exist, but they're not really there. And there's no really easy to reference documentation tell you where to find the data. So there isn't some sort of schema documentation that's readily available, and it's easy to use anyway. There's actually quite a few things out there, but none of them are that simple to use. So we want to kind of address this problem really first. So we want to make this process a little bit easier. So today I'm going to introduce you to some of these tools, a lot of which you may already be familiar with, but some of which you may not be familiar with. And hopefully these can help you kind of find the data you're looking for a little bit easier. So the first one of those is the DBDEF utility. Now, you may or may not have access to this, but first thing you need to access DBDEF, you need access to LID. That's the Lawson Insights desktop. I'm sure if you're on this call, you probably have LID access. If you don't, in order to get to DBDEF anyway, you would need it. And we'll go over what that can do for you to help you find out what data you need. There is a utility called DBDOC, which is actually a great utility that can give you some database information, some documentation on your database and what some of the fields are, what some of the indices and relationships are. That's a great tool. There's DBURF, DBURF, which isn't so important for finding out what the database information is, but sometimes you're on a screen and you're trying to find out what tables does this screen affect, right? So if I wanted to get the tables behind the screen, where would I go? And that's where DBURF comes in. You can use the portal itself as a great tool. So there's field help and there's a debug mode within portal that you can use to get some great information as to where to find some of this data. And then there's several other utilities like a range DB dump utility that you may or may not have worked with that can help you extract the data so that you can use that information to write better SQL code, or at least to verify that your SQL code is correct. I do that all the time. And you can write range DB dump with filters and some parameters, which is really neat. There's a count utility, so that's kind of good because you can compare the results you're getting in SQL with the results you'll get this way. And then last but not least, you can use the Management Studio to kind of go through your data if you're a Windows customer, or if you're a Unix customer or using Oracle or DB2, you can use the corresponding utilities that come with those databases. So let's talk about DBDEF really quick. It's a great way to explore the table and discover relationship indices and fields and field names, okay? So how do we do that, okay? So I'm going to switch over to my live area here. Give me a quick second while I bring that up. It's actually switching back and forth is not the easiest thing to do. So I'm going to bring into my view here. Hopefully you can see this. So I've got lid opened here. And I'm going to go into the DBDEF utility. And hopefully you can all see this. Let me see if I can make it a little bit more visible. Hopefully that's better. Okay, so you notice the first thing it asks me for is the product line. The product line that I'm using is called Live. I happen to have all of the different applications installed. This is a little bit of an older machine because I'm running it off my laptop. So first thing I do is I selected my product line. Now I can select the table name. You know, you see all these tables here, or I can just type it in. So for the case of simplicity, since most of you kind of know this one table, hopefully I'm going to look at the employee table. And you'll notice quite a bit of useful information right away. This is all the fields on that table. Now, what's really nice is that sometimes this shows you stuff that the database does not show you. I can't see a great example of it right now. Well, actually, here we go. Okay, so there's all these compute fields, and with conditional with conditions on them. You wouldn't know that if you're looking at the database. Okay, and then the other thing that you wouldn't know if you're looking at a database, and I'm kind of skipping to a slide ahead. Let's see. Here we go. Oh, that's not going to work for us there. Okay, so we'll come back to that actually. Good. So let's say I'm on this table and I want to know what indices there are for this table. So what I can do is hit F6 for define. And if you're used to lid, you're probably used to this navigation. But if you're not, you'll notice there is within DBDEF and within most Lawson applications that use this text kind of based presentation, you'll get a menu system that corresponds to your F keys on your keyboard. So this blue bar on the bottom is the F key. So help would be F1, F2 is blank, clear is F3, select is F4, all the way down to define, which is F6. So I'm going to hit define. I'm going to select A for indices, and sure enough, here are the different indexes that I have on my database, and I can select each one of these. And another cool trick is you can use Control J. I don't know why Control J, but Control J to cycle through them. So a more interesting table might be pay deduction. Because here I've got some bigger indices, and I can see all the index fields. So obviously, if you're used to writing queries, you'll know why an index field is important, because this is, especially this very first index, the one that ends with the number 1. This is just Lawson's nomenclature for this. This isn't a database nomenclature. But you notice it also says primary index is set to yes. There's only one primary index. You notice these other ones are set to no. EYD set 1. So you'll notice that this primary index has 10 fields in it. So these 10 fields are all not only required, but it means that there cannot be a duplicate of these 10 fields within the table. Now, what it does, it actually enforces that for you, which is really nice. And knowing that is essential for knowing how to write really good queries. And writing a query that uses a specific index is recommended because it can be a lot faster to return your results. In fact, if your query is not returning results very fast, it's probably because you're not using the correct indexes. So that's that. And then the other really nice bit, which is the bit that is more useful to me, is if I do F6 again and I look at option B, which is relations, I'll notice that there's all these relations here. Now, there's been a lot of times where I'm looking at data in a table. Okay, so let's say I go here and I say select star from pay deduction. Okay, and I see this, and I've got all these fields, right? And the field I'm looking for is dead code. Okay, it's just this number, right? I'm trying to figure out, okay, so what is this field? What does it even mean? I know what dead code is, that's deduction code, but what does number 14 mean? What does number 12 mean? And where do I find that information? So I can sit here and rack my brain trying to figure that out, or I can just go to DBDEF, do an F4, and look for one that makes sense. Now, these are named, okay? So they're actually named by a human being at some point, okay? So I look at this one called dead code. That sounds about right. And it tells me that the information for dead code comes from a table, a related file called dead code. So it's actually DEBDOC. So if I go back and I type in dead code, I'll be like, sure enough, okay, so this is the table I'm looking for. And then here I can say, I can return information back from dead code and look at number 14 maybe. Oh, okay, so that's savings bonds. Or number 12 is dental DMO pre-tax employer. So I wouldn't have known what table to look for because as you can see on the left here, there is several thousand tables or something like that, and I would have been completely lost trying to look for the right one. And there was no other way for me to know that within the database, because if you go here, like for example, if I go to the one we just looked at, so pay deduction, well, sorry, I look for pay deduction. But this experience is just finding it is painful enough, right? So if I look at pay deduction and I look under constraints, there's no constraints that are actually sitting here, right? So there are these indices, so those are there. But even here, if I looked at the properties of this index, they're not that easy to understand here because I don't see some of the information that I see on my under DBDEF, in particular, whether or not, DBDEF kind of really spells it out for me. It says like, this is for pay deduction. It tells me that this is the primary index, so this is the way Lawson likes to look at the data. And remember, a database is organized so that it returns that business information well. So I could look at it this way, but especially if you don't have access to look at these, would be very difficult. But certainly, I can't even look at some of these, the relationships, because they don't even exist on the database, right? So Lawson does not put those relationships on the database level, at least not in this current version of S3. So it's possible that that may change in the future with some of the landmark applications. So that's that with looking at DBDEF, but I do want to show you yet another feature of DBDEF that you may not know that can really help you understand the data at some point. So here's a great field called tax bases, okay? But you'll notice if I go here and say select star from pay deduction, and I go all the way out to tax bases, right? Well, I don't have very good data to show you that there's data here. Actually, that's a good example. So I don't have the data, but if I'm trying to write a program to return data, how would I know what's going on here? And there's no table that's holding definitions for tax basis stuff. So I'd be pretty lost. The only place I can go is to DBDEF. So I can do F6 here and hit B for value list. Oh, not tax bases. Thwarted by my own example. Tax flag. Tax flag S versus T. Now, how would I know what S or T are, right? So look at this value list. Look at that. It shows me a value list of what the valid values are. So T means tax, and S means tax status, and tilde means no tax. How would I ever know that? There's no other way. So I would have to use DBDEF to find these values and be able to translate them. That's an indispensable tool that I don't think that information exists anywhere else. So we talked about relationships, we talked about indices, and we talked about value lists. Let's go back to our presentation here. Okay, so we talked about value lists. And so the next tool in line is DBDOC. So DBDOC is an incredible tool that is not very often used by most people. It allows you to find out more about a database table than you probably could any other way. Okay, so let's really quickly look at DBDOC. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because once you've seen it used once, you've seen it used 1,000 times. So again, we're just going to use the table that you're probably most familiar with. We're going to use the employee table. So if I just type in DBDOC and hit enter, it gives me the usage for this, which is exactly how I use it every time because I always forget. And I've never really used any of these flags because I think I kind of like it without the flags, but looking over these flags, this seems like a really, really interesting one with the -W. I've never used that, but you know, if you have used that, please let me know what your experience is. That sounds really cool to be able to have web output for this. So if I do DBDOC, my product line is called live. Yours might be called prod, and then you need to give it the system code. So, and the employees table is in the HR system. And then I just typed in the name of the table. And then I want to pipe this somewhere. So I'm going to pipe this to LA Show. That means I want to see the output of it within another application. So that's LA Show. So really the part you need to kind of pay attention to is that. So I'm going to DBDOC live HR employee. And the way I just followed this example up here. So it says building the file. It takes a few seconds for it to actually build this file. In the background, it says processing file employee. So here's what's cool. So right away, it gives you a kind of a little bit of information to let you know whether or not you're in the right table. So right away, you should be able to say, oh, maybe this is not the table I'm looking for. Oh, yeah, this is exactly the table. It just contains all employee information needed in the Lawson payroll system. The employee PA information file stores additional information used by the Lawson human resource, personnel, and benefits systems. HR 11.1 employee is the primary program that updates this file. Pretty great information if you didn't know about this. Now, most of you are familiar with HR 11 and the employee table, so this may not be that mind-blowing, but really if you're looking at a different table that you've never seen before, this tool is indispensable. I usually skip past these first few things, but then you get to the real useful part, which is the field descriptions. Let's get to a description of a field that we probably don't wouldn't know. Let's say I did not know what EIC status means, okay, and I, for the most part, don't. So it says indicates if the employee's EIC status is single or joint, okay. So 1 means single, 2 means joint, and 0 means not applicable. So that's good to know because I wouldn't have been able to ascertain that from the database at all. Pay frequency, you know, these are the codes for pay frequency. Shift, these are the codes for shift. Salary class, those are like H and S. So this is not in the database, but you know, DBDOC is able to tell you all this information. So it's kind of telling you the same information you really saw within the DBDEF tool, but it can give you some more text information, text help. So this is interesting. It says the number FTE contains the employee's FTE, but it does kind of really go into a discussion about, you know, a half-time FTE versus, you know, full-time, the number of hours and whatnot. So that's really interesting, but just keep going down here, and hopefully I won't skip it. I believe talks about some of the derived fields. And you can do searches within this. So I can say EMP set 1. I just used the F2 key. So all right, good. So we just jumped all the way down to the first index. It tells you that the first index is company and employee, and that is used in all of these different screens plus more. So that's a very popular index. So I would expect this. So those are the indices, and then here are the relationships. You can just look at the relationships here. So this is an indispensable tool for finding data if you're trying to write SQL calls. Going back to our presentation. Okay. Portal tricks. Now, I have to assume that you are all using Portal by now, like good Lawson users, and soon enough you'll be using the Mingle product. And if not, you're probably in something called the Workspace, which is just nothing more than Portal. And spoiler alert, Mingle is basically just Portal for all your current S3 screens. So there's really nothing new there. You're not going to use any of those social features very likely in this Mingle Enterprise tool. So within Portal, on any screen, you can do Alt-Control-A to bring up a debug screen. Now that's available to you, I believe, even if you're not a power user. It gives you tons of information that you can use to determine what field is on which screen. Or you can just put your cursor on a specific field and do Shift-Control-O, and that will give you at the bottom of your screen, you see it may be hard to see. It's not important that you see the actual text, but the fact that you know that it's there. So I would place my cursor in a specific field, and then underneath I would get the field help. So let's see if we can use that real quick. So if I bring up a Portal screen, and so you want to use these tools when you're on a screen that already exists and you're looking at data and you're wondering, how am I going to get this data in my SQL query? So I'm ready to write the SQL query, but I don't know how to get the Lawson screen data out of Lawson. And you may be exhausted using DBDOC and using DBDEF or whatnot. So again, I apologize. I keep using the same example, but it's the one I'm more familiar with, so I may be able to help a little bit better. So I'm going to go to HR11, and the server's running off of my laptop, so not the quickest thing in the world. So you'd be going to the actual Portal screen, where your data is, and you would use some of these tools that are available to you within Portal to determine what fields you're dealing with. So I'm going to select the company. I don't technically need to select data, but I'm going to go ahead and do that anyway. So I'm going to bring up a specific employee. So I'm looking at actual data. Then I might go to like the rate of pay. I want to see, okay, so where is this stored, right? Like where exactly is that? So I could do, let's see, what did I say? Shift Control A. So, sorry, no, that's not right. There we go. Alt Control A. Alt Control A brings me to this this window here, which just looks like a total mess, but there's plenty of really great information in here that you can use, and you can kind of go through it and see. So this is all the data in like XML format, and then there is just tons of information here. But then under keys, and I believe another place as well, there is there's all the actual field names. So you can kind of scroll down and find the field name that you want. And if you know which three-letter acronym or which table this three-letter acronym corresponds with, then you've pretty much found your table. So PEM is, I believe, PA employees. So I kind of already knew that. And then EMP is employees. I knew that. But there are tricks for finding out what those are as well, and hopefully if we have time we can go over them. So this is HR user fields and HR emp user. So that's how that works. So that was Control Alt A, and the other one is I'm going to put my cursor in the field here and do Shift Control O. There we go. And you'll notice at the bottom of my screen it says EMP-pay-rate. And hopefully you can see that, but if you can't, it just goes into your status bar. You have to make sure that your Internet Explorer settings are set up exactly right in order for you to be able to see the status bar, and that you're using, you've added Lawson as the secure application within Internet Explorer. But then that's how it works. It's very easy. So without those tools, it'd be kind of difficult to find the data that you need. The next one is range DB dump. Now, many of you probably already use range DB dump, and you may or may not have also used these powerful flags that come with them. But the way you use range DB dump is right from that command line. You can do range DB dump. I usually use the -C option that gives me a CSV output, the name of the product line, the name of the table, and then you can say which field you want back. So this is a lot like writing SQL, really. I mean, I would have basically said select first name, last name, process level from employee where the emp status is AG. Instead, I'm saying range DB dump employee first name, last name, process level where the status V is for values, where the value of emp status is AG. And that returns these three employees whose status is AG. And it tells you how many records. And there's all kinds of flags you can do on range DB dump. I won't go over it. I won't do a live example because it will take some time, but I think that you guys get the idea. It's just remember this command, RNG DBDUMP, and you can just type that into a lid session, and it will give you the usage for it. And all you need is the product line and the table name. There's another utility called count. So you can just do count, then followed by the name of the product line, and you can even follow that up by the name of the table or the system code, and it will tell you exactly how many records are in that table. So you can see I've done it for the whole product line here, and I can tell that the AC console table has 1,792 records in it. So that's really useful information to have when you're about to do a query, because you don't want to do a inefficient query on a table that has 45 million records in it. So it's kind of nice to have this count. Another reason to have the count is to verify your query results. So I would do a count and then kind of do a reality check. Does this make sense based on how many records are on the table? You can also do a count directly on the database. It's, obviously that's probably even better, but it's nice to have it in lid to kind of have a reality check. And then another place where I really like doing this is when I do an upgrade or when I do a conversion or a migration to a different system. I like doing a count before of all the tables and a count after on all the tables, and I do a diff between the two to see what changed, and everything that changed, I better have a really good explanation for. So we talked about this in the last session. What you need in order to do stuff with SQL, right, aside from all this information I just kind of told you about, is you need a SQL client, obviously. And you need the connection information, and you need your username credentials. The SQL client that I've been using today, that's the Management Studio, the Microsoft Management Studio, which is great if you are a Microsoft client. And if you're not, you can use any of the products by Toad that work really well. They're a little bit on the complicated side. But if you have a good DBA, they can walk you right through it. There's also one called Win SQL that I really, really, really like, but I believe you have to pay for that one. I think there's a 30-day trial, and then you have to pay for it. So if you're just trying to get started and you want to start with 30 days, maybe try Win SQL for 30 days, and then you can kind of go from there. So why did we go over all this stuff? It's because technically, you probably all know how to write SQL, but you don't know how to find all that data really easily. And that's kind of really what makes me a good SQL writer, is because I know how to find this data. It's not like I've memorized all these tables. It's not like I know every single field. It's just that I can go through this and I can find the data very quickly using the tools that I showed you today. But why would you use SQL, right? So you can use it for using some ad hoc reporting. You can use it for doing some database cleanup, like finding duplicates or orphaned records and fixing those. You can hack the Gen database, and I'll say this with a ton of warning, but there are very powerful things you can do if you know what you're doing within Gen. And I'm not going to go over any of them really today, but for example, if you're migrating a system and you want to remove all your report files and things like that over, you can use some of the Lawson utilities, but it really helps to be able to dig into the Gen database and do some reporting there. There are sometimes where your bookmarks fall out of order, and understanding what those bookmark issues are and possibly fixing them, SQL can be a really great help for that. One of the biggest places where I have found SQL really has helped me out, where things have gotten seriously confusing, and there hasn't been sufficient enough tools to help me, is LBI. So LBI has got hundreds and hundreds of tables and several different databases that store information about your users and what reports they have access to and what those reports are and what each one of their features is, whether or not they're turned off and on. And sometimes there just aren't tools to return that data to you within LBI itself. So it's really great to be able to have access to those tables where you can write those types of queries. And I have a lot of customers that have gone the next step, and they've written some very powerful scripts that can go through and reassign reports to people based on their statuses and things like that. I don't necessarily recommend doing all of that because you can really screw up LBI, but if you can figure it out, it can be very powerful. And listen, if you have the need and the tool isn't there, you don't have any other option, right? And then there is, you can update some tables with missing information. And I'll show you a really viable example of that, like when you would want to do that. I mean, it sounds like a scary thing to do, but okay, so let's look at some examples. Okay. So I looked at a few of the things that I've done in the past, and like I said, the examples may not be that useful to each one of you, but hopefully what's really more useful is knowing where I went to get that information, which is why I changed what I was doing to kind of show you some of the things I use to help me develop these things rather than showing you what I've done. But here are some examples of things you can do. Here's how I find out where in the process my PR140 is. Because, you know, if you run payroll, PR140 can take a long time to run. And you never really know how close am I to being done with this thing. So it's really cool to be able to just run this query where it shows you by process level and PR140 run flag. So if I run this, none of them are actually, I'm not running payroll right now, but you'd see a little star in the one that's running. And another thing you can do, actually run these separately because in this database they don't run. So I can see how many databases have the run flag blank and how many databases exist. And if I divide those two numbers, that's how far along I am. In this case, it would be 100% along, but it could be a little bit, it could be I'm only 10% along, and it kind of is nice to know how long that's taking. And you can, if you're clever enough, you can probably write a script that measures the performance of your system based on just how PR140 is running. The other question I always get is like, how do I know which user field when I'm writing a query? Well, there's two tables within Lawson that hold user field information, and it's a little tricky to kind of get your mind around how that works. There's HR emp USF and there's the HR user field. HR user field actually holds the user field itself. So if you set up a new user field, you get one new record that goes into this table. So if I look at that, so I'm returning everything from that table right now, you notice I've got 8 user fields, and they're each assigned a field key, 92 through 99, and they each have a meaning. But if I bring up HR emp USF, you notice I got 28 employees that are assigned user fields, but when I look at the field key, it doesn't tell me what this is, so that can be a little confusing if I'm looking at this. And why is this query an interesting one? It's because a lot of times you're asked to return employee information in a report, okay? But they also want a field return that happens to be a user field. Well, the problem with that is you can write that query and bring that user field out, but you wouldn't, a lot of times you don't know what that user field actually is, so you got to go look it up. That's fine and everything, and you can hard code the key number of that value in your query, but here's a big problem. If you then move that query from your development system to your production system, you may break the whole thing because that key number may not be consistent between your development system and your production system, which is why I wouldn't use this key number. I would actually use the name of the field, and you'd notice here I've said where the key number is the same as the key number and the field name is this. So I've joined those two tables together to return my my results. And here I basically said I want all the employees that have the experience level user field set, and the value of that. I want to see the value of that. So you'll see that there's 2 employees that have a value of 4 in their experience level. I wouldn't be able to do this consistently between different product lines if I didn't actually use the name of the user field. And so that's kind of a key thing when you're writing queries for user fields. You want to make sure. Another thing that can happen is you might get a circular bookmark, and that's a bad thing that can happen to your users. So from time to time, I don't know if it's really a problem with the very latest versions because they might have a good patch for this, but this is so I'm switching over to the Logan product line. I'm going to execute this, and you notice I'm pretty nice and clean now. I don't have any circular bookmarks, okay? But if I were to just select star from bookmark, I can show you what I mean. There is a field called parent bookmark. So each bookmark can have a parent. So this 4 has a parent of 2, but through some craziness, it turns out you can actually have a bookmark whose parent's ID is the same as itself. Well, when that happens, it breaks your bookmark. So you can find them that way, and the way I fix them is I just take that specific bookmark and I set the parent bookmark of it to 0, meaning it's its own bookmark, and then I can go fix it later. One of the questions I often get is, how do I find duplicates in my database? So duplicates don't really have a, there's not really per se duplicates in your database, right? Because hopefully your constraints are such that they don't create a duplicate. But you could have fields that are duplicates that you don't want to be duplicates, okay? So Lawson, for example, allows you to have a social security number that's the same for 2 employees. It allows you to do that because it's actually a fine business practice if that's what you plan to do. It just happens to not be a good idea. Now, if you want to find out who has that, which 2 employees have, the same social security number, there's a couple of tricks you can do. I've done kind of a more advanced version of that here. I wouldn't really call it advanced. It's not that big of a deal, but I've found a way to show both of those employees. Now, there might be more than one. I only show you 2 of them here. But if I were to get rid of this, so let me copy this and help you understand what I've done. Okay, so if I were to just run this one, oops, I don't want to debug. Let's just make sure this one runs. Huh. Oh. All right. So this is a good lesson. This can happen to you. Within your management studio, you could have the wrong database selected. So remember, I switched over to Logan. Now I'm switching back over to my apps product line. So you'll notice that there is 2 employees that don't have a FICA number, and then there are several employees that seem to be sharing FICA numbers. The way I've found that is to just do a count by FICA number and show it, but only show the ones that are greater than 1. And you may not have seen this keyword before as having, I can't use the where clause here because where only determines on the single record level, but having actually helps bring this out. I could have sorted, but see, this actually only returns the results that I want, which is really nice. Now, if I wanted to show those employees, I couldn't just say show the employee because that's 2 different employees. It wouldn't be able to show those on the same record, but it can show you the max one and the min one, so that the highest number and the lowest number as separate fields. So that's kind of a clever way to see which employees those are. So employee 60 and 61 both don't have a FICA number. Number 7 and 6 have the same one. 127 and 133 have the same one, and so on. So that's a cool way to see that. I'll share all of these with you guys. This is a neat one for reporting services. And if you use reporting services, this might make sense to you. This is a way for me to return all these access values for the reports. So that's kind of a neat one. Like I said, I will share all of these with you guys. So finding employees by EEO class that have been terminated within a certain date and things like that. So these are some of the ones that I've done over the years that people have asked for more than once that I decided I would share with you. So I will have all of these available for download on the site. I don't want to spend a lot more time on them. But one that I will spend a couple of seconds on is a lot of you now may have noticed that the employee table has yet another field at the end of it, which was added recently in the past year or two. That's called FICA number last four. So that's the last four numbers of your Social Security number. And if you didn't do your upgrade or your MSP updates well, you may not have all of those fields filled in. So if I run this, again, made the same mistake. If I run this, you'll notice all of mine are filled in, but many of you may have this column empty, okay? Or there might be some missing values here. So this is an example of where a SQL fix might be acceptable on your database, where you want to fill this field in. So basically I've said, give me all of the employees whose FICA numbers, well, the work country is US, so that's important, right? Because you don't have a FICA number if your work country, you may not have a FICA number if your work country is not US. And I've returned both of these, but here I've said, update the employee with the last, so substring of the FICA number, where the work country is US, and I could have said, and the, this field is empty. So if I said that, I could have fixed this issue. So this is an example of when it might make sense to update the database directly. I don't know, take it at your own risk, but it may be one of those things that you decide is a viable thing to do for your needs. Let's go back to our presentation real quick, and I think we're near the end. Oh yeah. So the next thing we've got coming up, and I think you probably have gotten several emails from us on this. We're doing a 10X upgrade boot camp here at our office on June 18th. There'll be several people from Infor that'll be here actually running that boot camp. We've got close to, I think close to 50 plus registrations on that so far. If you're going to be on site, I really recommend you do that immediately. That's here at our office in Newport Beach, California on June 18th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time. And if you have not, and if you do not attend in person, you can do that virtually. But I do recommend signing up for that because we're only going to allow 50 virtual attendees. Actually, we may be able to do 75 depending on if we get our bandwidth increased by then. But we want to have a live video stream and the presentation that they're doing up on the screen at the same time, and we want to make sure you get a good quality. So please register for that. You can go to nogales.com/education or nogales.com/bootcamp, or you can just go to nogales.com and click on the first pages. There's a link on the first page for the bootcamp. And we got several more just regular online webinars coming up in the next few months that we will let you know about. They're all available on our site to sign up for. And as always, we're always looking for more ideas from you as to what you'd like to see. At this point, I will open it up to Q&A, and I think there's quite a few things on here already that I'm just going to go really quickly through. So someone recommended a tool called Schema Spy. That's Schema Spy, all one word, that can help you figure out how to create a schema. I've never actually used that before. Thank you for the suggestion. And then the next question says, so the outputs of DBDOC and DBDEF, Greg says that they have published all of the web formats of those so that they can use them. That's a great, wonderful idea, so you don't have to run DBDEF and DBDOC again. And then one of you, Kim, you wanted to see the steps to DBDEF window again? Sure, I can definitely do that. It's quite easy. So from a lid screen, and you have to have access to lid, and you have to have access to DBDEF. So those are two things you may not have, but once you do, you can just type in DBDEF on the command prompt, and this will pop up. So this is the DBDEF tool, and it's all menu driven. So you can just hit F4 for select on that first field, select your product line. Then hit F6 for define and say define files. That's option A. And then now you have access to all the files. So if I hit F4 here, which I just did, you see all the files. Or if you know the name of the file, you can just type it in, and you can hit down arrow. I know it's not ideal. You can set up lid very differently for your use, but that's how you kind of get to the database table view. And then I had a difficult question. I'm sorry, I'm not showing my screen. Sorry about that. Let me do that real quick. I apologize. So DBDEF window pops up. F4, I select my product line. F6, now you notice the menu is at the bottom. F6A for files. And then here you just have all your files. So you can select them, or you can put in a new one that you already know the name of, and you can explore that way. Sorry about that. And then a difficult question that came up is, how do you know what three-letter acronym, Carla has asked, what three-letter acronym means what table? You know, there's not a great way, to be honest with you, to know that. I have managed to memorize a lot of these over time. There is a document that is floating around, and if I can dig it out, I will share it with you. And I will put it on the site with the download of this presentation. So you'll get an email when that's available online again, and I will try to find that and put it in there. Now, if you guys, one of you has a suggestion, let me know. Oh, actually, yes, Steve, thank you. That is a great suggestion. If you have the add-ins tool within the query builder, if you enter that three-letter code, it gives you the table name. Thanks, Steve. I totally forgot about that. I don't use the add-ins as often as the users do, so this is a great idea. And Billy also came up with that same suggestion. Thanks, guys. That's an excellent way to go about it. So the add-ins can be your friend. Depends on the version of add-ins you have, but I'm hoping that you guys have all been good citizens of the world and done your upgrades in time and figured all that out. And like I said, all of this stuff will be available for download later. If you've signed up for our newsletter, you'll get an email telling you that that's there. And then Greg also says that the information is also available in the GEM database. I believe you're right, Greg. That is, I think, in a something files table. I don't quite remember, but I'll look that up as well. So I guess Carla, great question, because all these good suggestions are coming up for how to walk your way from the three-letter acronym to the actual table. I will give you guys a big warning about that, by the way, which some of you may already know. Big warning about those three-letter acronyms that you find on the portal screen and thinking you can find your way back to the table by using some of these tools. Keep in mind, when people go back and modify these COBOL programs, they have a little bit of free reign of naming certain fields something on the screen itself. That's just the name of the field on the screen, okay? It's not the actual database field, okay? So if it was a good programmer that modified and applied a patch to that screen, they probably used that same three-letter acronym for the screen field name. If they changed it, which they easily can, that would not have been the case. Okay, so it'd just be whatever they decided to call it. It wouldn't even have to be a three-letter acronym. So I'd say 95% of the time you're safe. That other 5% of the time you have to do some digging on your own. Any other questions? Okay. I don't see anything coming up. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate you guys logging in. And more importantly, what I'd really request from you is that you give us suggestions for other webinars that you want to see. You know, our dedication is to contribute back to the client base here, and that's what we do with this training. If you notice, there is not any kind of sales speak really within it. And what I'd like to do is to just kind of keep it that way. We do these for our managed services customers quite often. So if you're a managed services customer that's on here, you have probably already seen a dozen of these presentations this month. So we do it quite often for managed services, but we want to do it for all customers. So please, we only have so many suggestions that come to us from our managed services customers. So we would love to get a lot more of your suggestions as to how to go about these. The presentations are put together by consultants in the field. Some of them are put together by our customers, and I happen to just kind of be the guy that gets volunteered to deliver them every time. So I hope that they're of use to you, but really your suggestions are everything. We had a lot of requests for figuring out how to find the data around and become more efficient as a query writer. So I thought that some of these suggestions might help you. But if you have other suggestions on how to improve query writing also, please go ahead and send those to me, tan@nogales.com, and I will include them in the documentation that I post as a part of this presentation. I noticed a lot of you had some brilliant suggestions along the way that I will use in the notes that I post. I have a question from Linda that says, how about crystal reports and LBI? Yeah, those are great tools also for retrieving data out of Lawson. That kind of really opens another door. Now, really, it cannot hurt to also have a SQL query window open as you're writing an LBI report or a crystal report, because really it helps you figure out where your data is and do some checking. And a lot of times you can just copy and paste that SQL right into your crystal reports window. I don't have a crystal reports example ready to show you, but crystal reports is obviously one of the greatest tools for pulling data out of Lawson. I just find SQL to be a lot more intuitive and quicker to kind of get off the ground. So I really recommend using both if you're developing something within crystal reports. Oh, I'm sorry. Linda was suggesting crystal reports and LBI as a class. Yes, that is absolutely a great idea. I'm sure everyone would concur that those are things that we could definitely do an online class on. I will get busy on the crystal reports for you right away. I've got one of our great crystal reports guys on our staff that is been dying to do one actually, and we just haven't done one yet because I want to get this one out of the way as a foundational course. So great suggestion. We'll probably have to do a whole series on crystal and LBI because there's so much to learn. There's just tons within LBI that people are not familiar with. So thank you for that suggestion. And Julie has replied with file def is the table in Gen with the prefixes. So thank you, Julie, and we can kind of take a look at that real quick for you guys. And here, I'll show you guys a real quick trick. RNG DB dump. So range DB dump, gen, and I already forgot the name of the table, so let me see. File def. Look at that. Here's all those 3-letter acronyms you asked for. Ask and you shall receive. This is great. So, you know, if you got a 3-letter acronym of VBA, you know that is the AV then BAL table. So that's the vendor, I'm sorry, AP then BAL table. That's the AP vendor balances table. So great. I will actually, what I will do is I will change this quick line to so I will include this 2000 record file to the record that I post on there for you guys, so that you can discover all the 3-letter acronyms on your own using a handy spreadsheet. Right? Okay, so if there are no more questions, we're going to go ahead and stop recording now. And if there are, you